A year ago today, Revenant Hill was announced at the PlayStation Showcase. As a new YouTuber who was just starting to find his footing, I was following the event, but I didn't expect much to come from it. At least, nothing that would be relevant to my young channel. And by St. Rubello was I wrong. The reveal of Revenant Hill, the next game by Scott Benson and Bethany Hockenberry, sent shockwaves through the community. It seemed that at long last we were going to get a follow-up entry to our beloved Night in the Woods. As a fan, I was thrilled. I'd been following Scott's Twitter page since early 2020, when he posted this teaser for the game. As a new content creator, I was overjoyed. I love writing and making video essays, but one of my goals when I started this channel was to become the body video of Night in the Woods. The guy our community could count on to not only analyze a current game, but to cover upcoming ones as well. I loved reading all of the articles about Revenant Hill, soaking up all of that information, pulling it together into a concise format to share with all of you, and trying to come up with some reasonable theories about what the finished product might look like. The subsequent breakdowns I put together were a blast as well. I had dreams of doing the same thing for future trailers, of taking off work on release day, and dropping content about Twigs and the Lower North for years to come. Character commentaries, theories, secrets videos. I had plans to do it all. But unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be. 6 months later, Revenant Hill would be cancelled due to Scott's declining health. As disappointing as the news was, for me, those feelings subsided quickly and were replaced with relief that Scott was doing what he needed to do in order to take care of himself. I can make videos about other games and cover other upcoming titles, but we can't get another Scott. And as has been documented elsewhere, his health, both mental and physical, suffered during the development of Night in the Woods. At one point, he passed out in his kitchen and needed to be woken up by his cat. The starving and suffering artist is a decorated societal trope, but the fact is, no one should have to sacrifice their well-being for a creative endeavor. So, as much as I'm bummed that we're never going to meet all of the awesome characters in this promo image, I'm glad that Scott is taking care of himself. Speaking of Scott, it does seem like he's doing pretty well. He's been posting his usual mix of socially conscious and comedic content over on Twitter, and some shots from his hiking adventures over on Instagram. It's really great to see. Whether or not Scott ever gets back into the video game industry is obviously something that will depend on his health and how comfortable he feels with working again while managing his condition. And given how personal a matter that is, I'm not going to speculate one way or the other. But that having been said, I think that Scott should hold his head high no matter what the future holds for him. Night in the Woods is 7 years old, and I still hear from people almost every day who say that the game changed their lives for the better or helped them get through something difficult. Nothing will save us forever, but a lot of things will save us today. And for many of us, Night in the Woods is one of those things. It will always be there for us so long as we have a PC or a console to play it on. And that's a beautiful thing. Plenty of creative people spend their lives dreaming about making a book, a film, or a game that is as meaningful to others and as impactful to a community as Night in the Woods. So as far as I'm concerned, if he never makes another game, he's still given the world something of tremendous value, something we all should be grateful for. Now, let's get back to Revenant Hill itself. The last time we talked about it, when the game was cancelled, it didn't seem appropriate to speculate at all about what the game might have been like, or anything along those lines. But this is a retrospective video for a game that will never be released. So under these circumstances, having already discussed the human issue at the heart of all this, and with the benefit of time, I do think it's fair for us to theorize a bit, both about the likely timeline for the project and what the final product might have looked like. It's impossible to say how far along in development Revenant Hill was, but I can't imagine it was particularly close to release. I'd wager that enough was done to warrant the announcement trailer and the fairly detailed description of features that we saw last year, but nothing approaching what we might call a playable build. From the beginning, a lot of people asked me when I thought the game would be released, and though I declined to speculate publicly out of respect for the developers and in the interest of not getting anyone's hopes up, privately, my bet was October 2025. Again, it's baseless speculation, so by no means should you take that to the bank, but I do think it's a good reflection of how far along I think the game was. Remember, though we didn't get an announcement trailer until 2023, Scott did post a teaser on Twitter way back in 2020. So, all in all, I think it's fair to say that Revenant Hill was firmly in the middle of its development when it was cancelled, far along enough to show off, but not enough to consider an alternative to cancelling the game altogether. While we're on the topic, just to be clear, as unfortunate as it is, the game is indeed cancelled. Sometimes I get comments asking me if based on the initial press release, it would be more accurate to use the word postponed. But it really is cancelled. Sadly, the Glory Society is no more, and all of the developers who worked there have moved on to other projects. It's important to remember here that Night in the Woods was, for the most part, a three-person endeavor by Scott, his wife Bethany, and Alec Holoka. Revenant Hill, however, had a much larger team behind it, and no doubt each member of that team played a significant role in the creation of the game's lore, characters, and game mechanics. So even if Scott were to return to the video game scene, I personally doubt that he'd want to start up Revenant Hill again, because so much of its DNA is tied to the work of other creators who might not be available. In terms of gameplay, I'm sure it would have been similar to Night in the Woods, with simple story-based quests, but with a social simulation element added onto it. In Night in the Woods, checking in with side characters like Lori and Selmers led to hangout segments or unique scenes later in the game. I suspect that Revenant Hill would have operated in much the same way, but with the ultimate goal being to convince these characters to join your up-and-coming community. I'm sure that Twigs' closest friend in the cast would have been this character, who I dubbed our witch, and that aside from growing your community, the primary thrust of the plot would have been about our protagonist's effort to become her familiar, as mentioned in the PlayStation blog post. To do this, Twigs probably would have had to do all sorts of tasks for her all over the lower north. Things like sneaking into locations only they could reach, such as guarded factory buildings or museums, or collecting mice and other materials to be used in spells and rituals. By the end of Act 1, I bet that one of these small jobs would have brought Twigs, our witch, and their fledgling community into conflict with the dark forces hiding in the lower north, thus kicking the plot into high gear. Again, everything I'm saying here is pure speculation, but my theory is that those dark forces would have tied into the workers' uprising going on in town. Perhaps the bosses running the factories would have been propped up by an eldritch entity, much like the cult in Night in the Woods. Now, on to what is probably the biggest question for all of you watching this video. Do I think that Revenant Hill was, ultimately, going to turn out to be a sequel to Night in the Woods? Well, as I've said several times at this point, when it comes to upcoming games that I'm covering, I really try to take a measured approach. Scott and other members of the team made very clear statements saying that Revenant Hill was not connected to Night in the Woods in any way. And as someone who has made, 20 or so video essays about the game to this point, I know how much fans are craving Night in the Woods 2, how much they'd love to get an update on the lives of May, Bee, Angus, and Greg. So, in the interest of respecting the developers and not flooding the internet with unnecessary amounts of copium, I took the stance that Revenant Hill was going to be a spiritual successor. A game that would remix the elements that we loved about Night in the Woods into a new format, like Hideo Kojima did with Death Stranding when Silent Hills got cancelled. I'm sure there would have been similar themes, characters, and probably even gameplay elements. But the more I think about it, there had to be something more going on here. From the little references, like the statue of Saint Rebello, to the constellation of Mundi, and the more in-your-face things, like the general appearance of Twigs, and the fact that whatever is happening in this scene is literally a repeat of the Possum Jump Massacre. As I'm writing this script, I find it hard to believe that it wouldn't have been connected to Night in the Woods in a more obvious way. Perhaps they would have left it for tinfoil hat guys on the internet like me to figure out, just like From Software does with their games. But my personal theory is that it would have been revealed in a post-epilogue scene that only would have been available to players who met a very specific and difficult set of conditions that Revenant Hill was a story May's grandfather told her when she was young. Perhaps we would have joined May as she cleaned out her room before moving to Bright Harbor, at which point she would have found an old, dusty book telling the story of Twigs in the lower north. Maybe it would have even been a story written by her grandfather, and not so much a book as a handwritten journal reminiscent of May's own. This epilogue scene could have then set up for Night in the Woods 2, if that was in the plans, or if it wasn't, provided some much needed closure for May's story and the fan base. Again, I have no inside information here. That's just my thoughts on the matter. But what do you think? If you've got a theory on what the game would have been like, or how it would have tied into Night in the Woods, feel free to share it down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. So, with all of that out of the way, what is next for the Night in the Woods community? Where do we go from here? Most other fan bases know a game in their preferred genre is on the horizon, even if they've gone a bit hollow as they wait for it, as is the case with all of us Dragon Age fans. But even if Scott never makes another game, even if this is the unfortunate end of the line for the stories of May, Twigs, Possum Springs, and the Lower North, there will be more Night in the Woods-like games. Last year, we got Fall of Porcupine, and though I haven't made as many videos about it as I would have liked, I really enjoyed the game, and I look forward to seeing what's next for the folks over at Critical Rabbit. But more than that, Finley's story gave me hope that the Night in the Woods formula could be applied to a variety of settings. It does seem like other folks have this same idea though, because this fall will be treated to The Last Time I Saw You, a game from Maboroshi Studios that takes the genre to 1980s Japan. In the years to come, I expect to see more games like this, games that take the formula and use it to tell stories that are rooted in their own lived experiences, just as Scott did when he wrote Night in the Woods. Personally, I think a Night in the Woods like about a teacher would be incredible, but that's just my background talking. And for those of you who are craving straight Night in the Woods content, 2 fan games, Love in the Woods and After the Fall, are on the way. Since they're both community creations, I wouldn't expect them to drop anytime soon, but demos for both are available, and I'll post the links down below for anyone who's interested. At some point, we also might hear some retrospective news about Revenant Hill that isn't speculative. The press release from the day the game was cancelled hints that the developers might share a bit of what they were working on down the line. It's unclear what they meant by this, but I'd imagine it would probably include the release of some concept art, an interview or blog post detailing some more concrete details about what the game would have been like, or screenshots and video clips from development. If anything like that drops today, as part of the 1-year anniversary of the announcement trailer, I'll push out a video as soon as I'm able to. In the meantime, I'm having the time of my life here on this channel, and I have every intention of continuing to make videos about Night in the Woods far into the future. So stay tuned for plenty more character commentaries, theories, and essays. When the time is right, I'd also love to do some true community endeavors here on this channel. I've mentioned Body a few times in this video. He's one of my biggest inspirations, and I was a huge fan of the art contests he held for Bloodborne 2, The Unseen Lands of Dark Souls, and Imagining Elden Ring. I even have the art book, as you can see from this picture here. If and when this channel gets bigger, and I can finance that type of project, I'd love to do something similar. We could imagine Revenant Hill, Night in the Woods 2, or even May's high school years. If something like that would interest you, let me know down in the comments. And who knows, maybe someday, I'll stop just writing about the video games I love and create something of my own for people to enjoy. Either way, thank you for being a part of this community, and thank you for for watching this retrospective of a game that we, unfortunately, will never get to see. Thanks for watching. Huge thanks to Wolf.Godwin for allowing me to use their incredible covers from the Night in the Woods soundtrack as background music for these videos, and Jordi, Jaen, Moreno for providing my channel art and my profile picture. You can check out both of these amazingly talented creators by following the link down in the description box. Big shout out to my silver and gold tier YouTube channel members and Patreon subscribers, including James Pruitt, Raven Lampkin, Hori Madsen, Gustavo Balabi, Lil Caesar, Reed, and Pathonian, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys next time!